Well, thank you, Kevin. And I assume you can hear me as well. I can hear the feedback. This is a great sound system. It's a pleasure to be here today. And it shouldn't be any other way that I am busy. And I apologize that I wasn't able to make your earlier meeting. But it's only appropriate that if you're working for the city, you should have a busy and full calendar. And mine is. And it might be surprising, since I'm a large-scale emergency or disaster preparedness coordinator manager. That's my role. And we don't have many of those in Carlsbad. And I'm going to explain why, and we're going to go through some of these risks that our region faces. But you wouldn't think I would be very busy if we didn't have many large-scale disasters. But it's like the tip of the iceberg. You just see the ice above the ocean. You don't kind of see the body of agencies and coordination between those agencies to make sure that when a large-scale disaster impacts San Diego County, we really respond as a region, how all of that communication, coordination, and resource sharing, information sharing works. So there's enough to it to keep me very satisfied and busy. I will mention our Community Emergency Response Team, our CERT volunteers. The City of Carlsbad started a CERT program 5 years ago. Betty has been a member of Carlsbad's CERT program. She's also been, as you know, a senior volunteer patrol member as well. So we appreciate the volunteer support that the City of Carlsbad receives. We couldn't do what we need to do in terms of public safety without the volunteer effort. And I'll come back to CERT towards the end, because they play a big role in educating the community, neighbors, about emergency preparedness. So much of what I'm talking about today, our CERT volunteers talk to their neighbors about, either directly door to door or through public outreach programs at the Carlsbad Village Fair, at the Spring Fiesta, and events like that, where we can set up a booth and do public education and information sharing. All of that is conducted by our CERT volunteers. But I'm going to start off by talking about, generally speaking about emergency preparedness. I want to talk about some of the potential hazards to our area. But one of the points I'm going to stress, and I want you to remember, is that you're very, very fortunate here in the heart of Carlsbad, in the village and in your facility. You're very protected, and I'm going to explain why that is here in a bit. I'm going to talk about some of these hazards, and the hazards I'm going to talk about are on the right: earthquake, tsunami, power outage, and I'll go through that list. Then I'm going to talk about information that's available during a disaster. I'll follow that with a discussion of resources that are available during a disaster, and then I'm going to talk about some preparedness options, both for facilities but most importantly, and this is probably where my talk this afternoon will make the most difference to you, personal preparedness, what you should be doing in terms of personal preparedness, what you can be doing. I've distributed 3 pieces of materials. I only had limited quantities of 2 of them. Everyone, I believe I brought enough copies for everyone to have received a copy of the Emergency Response Guide. I'm going to be referring to that. I brought a fair number of paper copies of the PowerPoint presentation I'm going to be speaking to today. So some of you were able to receive a copy of this. The first 9, and I apologize, I only had 9, they were printed by the County of San Diego, are rectangular slips of paper, and I see that we have someone holding an example up in the audience right now. And these are particularly useful because they're written to an audience that might have your special needs and requirements. And so on one side, it's what you might do to prepare, given any special needs or requirements that you have. And on the flip side, it's for caregivers, friends, family members to help you prepare, to be individually prepared for emergencies. So if you receive those, I'd ask that you take a look at them. If any of you would like one and didn't get a copy, I'm going down to the county tomorrow, and I'll try and bring some back. If I do, I will drop some off here. And then the third option is If your staff is kind of maybe they Xerox a copy. But I will try and bring more back from the county. I think I have a fair chance of doing that tomorrow morning. I can probably drop them off tomorrow afternoon. So I apologize, but I just didn't have enough of those third elements today. Okay. I'm going to start off with this disaster wheel. Emergencies are unpredictable. Right? We don't know when an earthquake is going to occur. Certainly in the Midwest, they don't know when a tornado, they don't get much notice of when a tornado is going to form. So this is a tool I use to train city staff in the city of Carlsbad, and we call it a disaster wheel. And in the colored triangles there, I have different risks or different potential hazards. And we've developed for our city facilities an emergency response guide that are tabbed to these particular hazards. Now the one it stopped on is a bomb threat, and I'm not going to talk about bomb threats today. But just to show you how this training device works, we then go to our bomb threat tab and review what our actions are in response to a bomb threat. And it works the same way for an earthquake or suspicious activity or a medical emergency and that type of thing. Now, your facility has emergency plans and they train on that as well. But the point I just wanted to make is that although we're not particularly vulnerable to these large-scale disasters here in Carlsbad, they are unpredictable, and we do train for them. As I said, the point I would like you to remember from today's talk, though, is that Carlsbad by the Sea is generally safe from most large-scale disasters. I don't want you to just take my word for it. I want to explain why this is in the next series of slides. So I'm going to start off with a discussion of earthquakes. Now, I have about a 3-minute video. It's interesting to me. I hope it's interesting to you, but it only lasts 3 minutes. And what it is, it depicts an earthquake starting just east of the Salton Sea, and this is based on modeling by the U.S. Geological Society, Caltech, and a number of scientific institutes, and it shows the energy impact of a major earthquake, like a 7.8 earthquake on the San Andreas Fault. And so you're going to see that earthquake rupture along the San Andreas Fault into the LA Basin, and it's going to head north. Carlsbad's right here. And what I would like for you to take away from this video is the difference in the energy and consequently the shaking and damage between Los Angeles up here and Carlsbad down here. It's color-coded. You're going to see oranges and reds project up this fault line into the LA Basin. You're going to see blues and greens come over to Carlsbad. The blues and greens are associated with weak to light shaking. So this is the big one we're talking about. This is the big 7.8. In Carlsbad, the impact is going to be weak to light shaking. The potential damage, none, or if we got over into the yellow areas, which don't really reach Carlsbad, maybe some very light damage. So the takeaway from this...
I can't see where you're going.
Okay. Well, I'm kind of constrained, so I apologize for that. So once again, this is going to run for about 3 minutes. We've got an earthquake right here. You can see the colors as it expands up the fault. And I'm going to step away so you can see. bumpy in LA right now, right? You get the gist of that. It runs for another 30 seconds or so. Okay, but here we are at the end of the video. You can see Carlsbad down here in the blue-green area. Light, possibly moderate shaking, no damage, possibly very light damage. So what are we trained to do when an earthquake occurs? Is this unfamiliar to anyone? Drop, covering, and holding? And here they just show a table, right? And it doesn't have to be a very sturdy table. I know it's difficult to do, but even under that piano would be fine. And what you're really trying to protect yourself from this is falling items from the overhead light lamps, or protecting yourselves from the glass that might break in the windows. The structures have been built to an earthquake code. It's unlikely, very unlikely, that the building would suffer any collapse type of damage. Okay, so you want to protect yourself from the missile hazards and the debris that shaking might occur with the breaking of windows and that type of thing. And that's why a desk is sufficient. And that's why you drop, cover your head, and hold on during that period. And so you want to stay away from windows and glass and the loose objects. Often with an earthquake, we're concerned about a potential tsunami hazard because we live on the coast. And but this slide, which was developed by California Emergency Management Agency, the California Geological Society, University of Southern California, says is that Carlsbad would be subject to a 14-foot rise in sea level for essentially a worst-case tsunami based on a local earthquake. Now, if this was a distance earthquake like the one that occurred in Fukushima 2 years ago, that number can change up to 16 feet. But whether it's on the other side of the world or local here in Carlsbad, the range of the rise in sea level, which is a transitory rise, is between 14 and 16 feet. That also is not a concern for you here at Carlsbad by the Sea. It's not a concern for the city of Carlsbad. We have mapped out the tsunami inundation zones in orange, and that's their impact on our coastal areas. And I don't show you the whole map here, but Carlsbad by the Sea is located right here. But I apologize, it's difficult for you to see, is that we've marked off the elevation boundaries, and you sit right at about 30 feet. Okay. In history, and based on the modeling, there's no 30-foot rise in sea level. It's twice the worst-case scenario. But let's say that some unforecasted, unforeseen, unprecedented event occurred that triggered a 30-foot tsunami. Where would you go? One option is for you to vertically evacuate within your facility, to go up to a higher level. And that's certainly the recommended one. And your facility managers coordinate that. A second option is to go out, and this is not recommended, is to go out and walk up to the 100-foot elevation line. In the city of Carlsbad, that occurs just east of I-5. So it's not going to be necessary. There's never been an incident that would cause this to happen. But just so you're informed that in that unprecedented scenario, that you have two options. Vertically evacuate, which is the recommended option. And if you are outside, or folks who are outside, they might want to go just to I-5, and then they would certainly be protected. But the only real threat in Carlsbad is directly in the coastal areas, and that's because we have the bluffs in our areas. Now, there are exceptions. In the lagoon areas, the water could come in, cross Carlsbad Boulevard, could come up to I-5, might cross I-5. So we plan for that, and we take that into our evacuation planning considerations. But that wouldn't be an issue or a threat for you here. In a power outage, how many of you recall the power outage in September 2 years ago? So it can happen here. You should prepare to have alternate power sources, particularly if you have electrical powered chairs or other devices, oxygen in your rooms, right? But nevertheless, in a large-scale power outage, the response strategy is also to shelter in place. And we talked about vertical evacuation for tsunami, but you're still within the facility. You're sheltering in place in the facility. You do the same for a power outage. This slide just shows Carlsbad's Emergency Operations Center. And I just wanted you to see that during the power outage, we had plenty of power. We had an electrical generator, which is providing power to all the resources we need to collect information. It's more of a challenge to get it out to you because power isn't available for you to turn on your TVs or that type of thing. And one of the primary information sources during an emergency where you don't have electrical power is radio. Now there's ham radio operations, and I know you have a connection now, I know you have a connection with Salvation Army, but for those of you that have cars or vehicles, a car battery in your car can power your car radio for quite a long time, and that's always a good source of information as well. So for a power outage, it's advised that we shelter in place as well. Wildland fire. What this map shows is the boundaries of Carlsbad. The red areas are those areas within Carlsbad that are of a higher wildland fire risk. Carlsbad by the sea does not sit in one of those wildland fire risk areas, okay? But I did want to give you an example of the types of alerts that we send out to warn residents of a wildland fire threat. And this is just 10 or 15 seconds. So if we need to notify Carlsbad residents of a wildland fire threat, this is the type of message that we would send out. It's an example of one of the 2 messages we sent out in 2007.
The city of Carlsbad is requesting that citizens who live south of Palomar Airport Road voluntarily evacuate as a precautionary measure.
So that type of message goes to your phone. We have copies of the AT&T white pages. If you have a landline phone, it will automatically go to your landline phone. It will go to this facility's landline phone. If you have cell phone numbers, individuals have to take actions to register their cell phones to get these messages. And we'll talk about that at the end. The instructions for doing it are in the colored handout that I gave you. It's on the back. I'll come back to that. For wildland fires, the response strategy is to shelter in place unless the fire approaches your facility. Now, I've shown you with the map that that's unlikely. Not impossible, but unlikely. Very unlikely. Another hazard that we can suffer from is flooding during severe winter weather. Can anyone recognize where this picture was taken? Anyone recognize that location?
Don't know that fire plug.
It's a quarter mile up the road on Carlsbad Boulevard. It's right before you get to the lagoon right there. And so in January of, I think it was 2010, it flooded halfway up to the height of that fire hydrant.
What year?
Right here.
What year?
2010, January 2010. And it doesn't occur frequently. It can occur. We can get a little bit of flooding on South Carlsbad Boulevard as well. But you and your facility are not vulnerable to that. You're set up at a higher elevation, as I said, close to the 30-foot mark. And the strategy for responding to these flooding incidents during the severe winter rains is to shelter in place. Heat during the summer. So now we're coming into the high heat season. We'll see the worst of it in August, typically August, September, sometimes into October. What do we do during high heat? Fortunately, you're in a terrific facility, and I'm sure that they'll keep the temperature cool. But if, for some reason, you lost power or weren't able to maintain temperature here, the City of Carlsbad Senior Center, is one of the 2 designated city facilities designated to be a cool zone. So if it was your facility staff's decision that certain individuals should go to a cooler facility, if you couldn't maintain coolness here, then that would be an option for you. Once again, the closest option is the Carlsbad Senior Center, just on the south side of Carlsbad Village Drive. Air quality. Of the incidents that I've been talking about, which incident is most likely to generate hazardous air conditions? Fire, the wildland fire. We saw that back in 2007. So we monitor air quality. And when the air becomes hazardous due to the particular matter in the air generated by the fires, the best strategy is to shelter in place. Stay indoors and let your filter and air conditioning, your HVAC systems filter that for you. Pandemic flu. Back in, it was June of 2009, we had a pandemic flu initiate. It peaked in late December, January into February of 2010. And this is a picture of a assistance center that we stood up. We call these points of dispensing or pods, where Carlsbad CERT volunteers in green assisted County Health and Human Service Agency nurses administer flu shots to protect residents from the H1N1 flu. So we're prepared to do that again if another flu outbreak should occur. Typically, a recommended strategy is to shelter in place, but it takes more than sheltering in place. It takes some basic personal hygiene strategies to reduce your flu transmission, person-to-person risk. Does anyone know what one of these primary personal hygiene strategies is to reduce?
Washing your hands.
Hand washing. It's what matters. It's very effective in reducing the flu virus and the transmission of the flu virus. How about if you have a cold or respiratory infection?
Stay home.
Yes, stay home. How do you sneeze? Do you sneeze using your hands? No. Into a curtain. The elbow's the best. Absolutely. When it's sneeze materials, so you don't transmit it to your neighbors, to doorknobs, to your working materials, and those types of things. Those are personal hygiene strategies. Social distancing strategies. Exactly. Sneezing into the elbow is an accepted strategy. Social distance strategies. Anyone know what I might mean by that? Stay in one place, shelter in place. We will likely close public facilities. We could close movie theaters, we could close down schools, we could close down the mall, and those types of things to limit the transmission. Those are social distancing strategies. Of course, you'd want to get an inoculation as soon as a vaccine had been, or a inoculation had been developed in response to that new novel virus. And if you get infected, then you need hospitalization. Okay. So I've gone through those large-scale disaster risks to Carlsbad, at least the most prominent ones, and I've explained that the impact to this facility is minimal and would be very, very remote. In other areas of Carlsbad, the risk is a little bit higher, and certainly our region is subject to some of this, which is why we plan as a region to respond to these large-scale disasters. But Carlsbad by the sea is generally safe from most large-scale disasters. Okay. So what resources do we have to respond to these disasters? We have a good supply of things over at what we call the Farmers Building. The Farmers Building is a city-owned building that sits at the corner of El Camino Real and Palomar Airport Road. It used to be a farmer's insurance building, which is why we call it the Farmers Building. The city bought it years ago. And it uses it for different things. Storage, different types of storage, city storage. We use it to store disaster supplies. So we've stored those things that you would think we should store, like cots and blankets and sheets and pillows and pillowcases and food and water and hygiene kits and medical supplies in the Farmers Building so that we can set up shelters. Because just as you've heard us preach to be self-sufficient and individually prepared for 3 to 4 days, 72 to 96 hours for a disaster, the city has to be self-sufficient as well. So the stockpiling of these supplies helps us be self-sufficient and prepared to handle these potential large-scale disasters. And those are the types of things we have over at the Farmers Building. With those things, we can set up local care and shelters. We exercise and practice this at our recreation facilities, including Harding and the Senior Center just up the road. Most likely we'd open them at Calavera and Stagecoach if the threat wasn't in those regions because they're a little bit larger. But as I said, we've exercised at Harding and Senior Center as well. And I know you're familiar with shelters, but fewer of you may be familiar with another type of facility called a local assistance center. A local assistance center is not to provide the basic shelter and food and water need. It's to assist with the collection of resources to help those that have been impacted by a disaster, their home might have been destroyed, recover. And we would do that at Dove Library. We set up a local assistance center there and collect resources. And we're not really interested in stockpiling physical resources. We want vouchers, we want gift cards, we want cash to enable you to go out and buy those things that you need. And this will provide assistance. Now, you have to rely on insurance and other things to carry the bulk of it, but this is to help us get over that initial, through that initial recovery period. I'm just going to go over this briefly. We map out where all the congregate care facilities in Carlsbad. We know where for example, the residential care for the elderly are in skilled nursing facility and other congregate care facilities. And we have the point of contact information on a map. We have electronic copies of this. We keep it in our emergency operations center so we can see where the incident is occurring and where it isn't occurring in location in vicinity of your vicinity if it is. And then we have the information to contact you if the need arises. There is also an organization which your staff is aware of. It's called the Residential Care for the Elderly Task Force. The purpose of this task force is to ensure that if we need to evacuate, we evacuate residents from a like facility to a like facility, from a congregate care facility to another congregate care facility, from a RCFE or skilled nursing facility to another RCFE skilled facility. Now, you're a part of the healthcare system. You have a plan for sharing evacuation resources amongst your organization. Some of these that are independent don't have that system to fall back on, so that's why this RCFE task force was established. Now, in an emergency, how are you going to get information about that emergency? Well, certainly your facility staff is going to keep you informed. And the city of Carlsbad puts information out on their webpage, and this assumes power, of course, through the cell phone devices that I gave you an example of. You heard a bit earlier. We call Alert San Diego. That was the evacuation notification you heard. We provide preparedness guidance through the emergency preparedness guide that you got. We do training through our emergency response guide. If I were to ask you about 211, and when you dial 211, not 911, but 211, who would know what I'm referring to? Who's familiar with 211?
City services?
Very, very, very close. It's really county health and human service agency type of services. And so it's much broader than the services that just Carlsbad can provide. The county has the Health and Human Services Agency. So 211 is staffed by live bodies, not a recording, 24/7. And if you need assistance with financial assistance or health-related assistance, something that you're not getting here, you can always call 211 and a live person will answer and provide a referral service and follow up, okay, and that type of thing. So we rely on them to pass out information during disasters. They have trained staff to do this. One of the primary sources of information is going to be television or the radio. We've already talked about the use of the radio and how to get radio information when the power goes out. And lastly, we have a cell phone mobile application. And if you're a cell phone user, I can tell you afterwards how to download that mobile application. It's not just San Diego County information, but you can get Carlsbad specific information. In our emergency operation, we push it out through the mobile app as well. So in addition to information services, well, let me start with another type of information service before I get to other services as well. When would you call 911? When do you call 911 as opposed to 211?
Emergency.
Life-threatening emergency, right? Health, safety, life-threatening emergency, always dial 911. Or follow the instructions of your facility. And I should have said this at the start, but let me mention it now and underscore it, that All the information I'm putting out about procedures and response procedures are general, okay? You should always follow the instruction procedures of your facility and facility staff during an emergency. So nothing that I'm saying today trumps your established procedures. They may supplement them, but you always listen to your facility and staffers. And there's other programs where you can get information. The Carlsbad Police Department has a You Are Not Alone program. The Senior Center has a Meals on Wheels program. I've already talked about school zones. I am going to come back and talk about what San Diego Gas and Electric can do. And I've already mentioned the RCIP task force in 211. This is just a screenshot of the 211 services which we just talked about. San Diego Gas and Electric, as a phone customer, can provide special services with those with special needs. They can assist with some billing issues. If you are power dependent, either because of temperature sensitivity, or you have power needs because of oxygen or electrically powered mobile devices or chairs or those types of things, San Diego Gas and Electric has a program where they can provide you both financial and informational assistance with that. And I'm moving into the final part of my presentation before we open it up into questions, and that gets to the issue of individual personal preparedness. So I want to talk about some of these items in detail. The following slides are going to be talking about personal preparedness items that you go into a kit or a pack-up kit, backpack, that type of thing. We've already talked about kind of shelter in place and evacuation, but in this handout, you have tips for both evacuation and sheltering on the right-hand side of the pamphlet under the stay or go decision question. Okay, so if you want to find out, once the decision has been made to shelter in place, what are the types of things you should be thinking about, that's in here. We pretty much talked about sheltering in place and evacuation. Cell phone registration. If you're interested in getting these Alert San Diego alerts like I showed you earlier, I'll be happy to talk to you about that afterwards. The only way you can do it, it's on the back of your handout, is to go to a website and register for Reverse 911. In San Diego County, we call our Reverse 911 system Alert San Diego. Alert San Diego is Reverse 911. Reverse 911 is us telling you of a large-scale disaster. 911 is you letting us know of a life-threatening emergency. You should always maintain updated contact information. You should share that with your friends and family and support staff. That type of information is on that rectangular handout that a number of you got. You should have copies of important papers and keep backup copies. If you're electrical dependent, backup power sources, and the smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors are maintained by your facility. You can register for these special services through San Diego Gas and Electric, and your staff does evacuation planning and review. So, lastly, moving into personal kit items. What should be in your personal preparedness kit? There is, when you open your pamphlet on the inside left-hand cover, a checklist of things that you should consider putting in a personal preparedness kit. I'm just going to run through a couple of those in this PowerPoint presentation. First one is a basic first aid kit. You can make your own first aid kit with your own Band-Aids and topical ointments and that type of thing, or you can purchase them at a drugstore or through the Red Cross. We don't sell them from the city. We sell none of these items from the city. Your facility probably does have an office preparedness kit with many of these items for just a larger number of people. You should consider having both a light source and communications device. You can buy these crank, hand-operated, crank-batteried flashlights. Some of them are also solar-powered flashlights. And you should have a communication device. And they can range from a smartphone to a not-so-smartphone to an older-style phone to a whistle, at least a whistle in your backpack. Certainly food and water. Meals ready to eat have the longest shelf life. They can remain good for 7, 8 years, depending on the temperature that you keep them at. Water bottled water is pictured here. It's okay. It has a shorter shelf life, maybe a year. You can get boxed water that lasts up to 5 years, and you can get canned water that can last 30 years plus. But probably for your needs, and it's easiest, more convenient to get the bottled water and rotate that out periodically. Masking tape is really a very universal tool. It can be applied in many applications. You can make many things out of it. You can repair many things with it. You should have that. You may want to consider a Mark 95 mask. Once again, if the air quality gets bad, if your filter system in the facility isn't working, then it's not bad to have a Mark 95 mask to filter out those particulate matter in the air. You might want to have some tools. It could be a plier set. It could be a Swiss Army knife. And you certainly want to have some personal articles. A change of clothes or two, your shoes, any medicines, sunblock, eyeglasses, even toilet paper, blanket, towels, some modest amount of cash. And that's a decision, whether you want to keep cash in there or not. And should you or your family members have pets, you might want to have a little backup kit for them. I certainly appreciate your attention. I know I kind of went through it quickly and haven't left a whole lot of time for questions, but that's what I would like to open it up for now. And for the most part, that was pretty close to 30 minutes. Yes, ma'am?
Does your mobile app work on the iPad as well as on the...
Yes, it does. It's so terrific. And I really encourage you
Would you repeat the question?
Yeah, great suggestion. I will repeat the question. The question was, does the mobile application work on an iPad as well as an iPhone? It works on tablets and smartphones. It will work on iPhone or Android phones. It will work on iPads or other tablets as well. And it's good. It's very good. When you get in there, I hope you're thrilled with it. If you have questions on it, my contact information is it's on the web address that's here. I also have cards. You can give me a call. I'd love to talk to you about it. I did have the last slide. I'm going to take more questions. I just wanted to let you know that I did have the last slide in case there's any questions about San Onofre's status. I didn't include it in the thread for a number of reasons, one of which was time, but I can answer questions about that as well if there's any questions on San Onofre. Yes, sir? Yes.
Well, we can order to evacuate. Is that going to be through the landline?
Yes.
Or is it going to go?
I'll repeat the question.
Or is it going to go to the staff of the building and they distribute it?
Yes, let me explain that. So the question was, when there is an order to evacuate, how will that communication flow? Will it go to you directly, or will it go to the staff? It's going to go both ways. We have an automated, we have a vendor service that provides an automated calling service that has all of the landline phone numbers. If you have an individual landline phone number, like your facility does, you're all in the same database. And these calls are going to go out to thousands of numbers simultaneously. You could get it a second before the facility, a second after the facility, but just about the same time over your landline. Now, if you haven't registered it for a cell phone, you won't get the call unless you've registered your cell phone. So, once the call has come out, your staff is then going to coordinate the evacuation procedures for your facility. And we'll be in communication with not only this facility in this area, but all of the other facilities that might need to evacuate in the event that it's a disaster that's impacting more than just one facility. Yes, sir?
I have a follow-up question. Will there be exercise on this? The reason I'm asking is I was living in Bonsall with the last big wildfire about 2 years ago, and I was never called with the automated system. And I had to evacuate. I didn't know I had to evacuate.
Yes. So the question was, this individual was living in Bonsall probably during the 2007 wildland fires, maybe 2003 or both, and they never received a call to evacuate. Why was that? This system didn't exist in 2003. It did exist in 2007. In Carlsbad, we generate the call from our emergency operations center. The audio tape I showed you, or you heard earlier, came from our emergency operations center. It was computer generated, but I created the call, okay? All local jurisdictions, all cities, are responsible for calling the residents in their cities. The county can do it if the city doesn't have the ability to do it. The unincorporated areas, and I believe Bonsall would fall into a county unincorporated area, is the responsibility of San Diego County. Now, I know that San Diego County put out many calls in 2007. I heard them all. But I don't specifically recall whether there was ones that went out to your area in Bonsall or not. Certainly that Rice fire merited an evacuation call. That was the name of the fire in your area back in 2007. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but part of my question was, will we have an exercise to see that indeed those calls get through?
Yes. We test them, but we don't test them with the 3 million residents of San Diego County. We can test subgroups. One of the things that we do with our community emergency response team volunteers is we put those calls out to them to make sure that the system is working. The county uses this system numerous times throughout the year for East County wildland fires. The system reliability is very, very high. Now, having said this, we just changed the vendor last September, so I don't have all the data like I did with the previous data. But the system reliability is very high. And if a call didn't go out, it's because it wasn't programmed to go to your area, and that could very well have been an error. I just am not familiar with who made the decision to call your area in 2007. So, are there exercises done? Yes, but not countywide. And does the system get used routinely so that we know it's operational? Yes, it gets used quite frequently for various things, missing person or some other type of smaller scale incident. And the third answer to the question is, once the call goes out, there's an automated reporting system. I can tell which phone numbers get called, which phone numbers don't get called. I can tell if it got answered personally. I can tell if it went to a voicemail. I can tell if someone got a text message. We program all this, we monitor all this. And so if I were to know your phone number from, we changed the vendors. At one time I could have traced that back and told you if your phone was called or not, and how it was handled. If it rang and rang and rang with no answer, if it went to voicemail, or whatever the case was.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
We've experienced not having the phones work here for over 24 hours. And when you're in any place where the phones are not functioning, you don't know if that's just your building, that's just your part of the city, that's the whole Southern California. You don't know that. And you have talked very little about phones being out, and everybody talks very little about phones not working because you're very dependent on phones.
Yes, yes we are. Even during the power outage, although we saw some phone outage.
Well, sometimes it's just because too many people are using the phone.
And during disasters, that's a probability. And one way to minimize the risk of the system being overloaded during disaster response phase is to send text messages instead of voice phone calls. And so,
Still takes power.
I'm sorry?
Still takes power.
Of course it takes power. And however, the phone companies and the telecommunication companies are building redundancy in their systems. So the call goes into a cellular network, and these cellular network signals are shifted between cellular towers throughout the county. Right? There's redundancy within the network system, and since 2007, a number of the communications companies, and San Diego as well, have built mobile electrical and communications capabilities. They call them CALs, it's an acronym. And so they can move these modular cell phone towers in your area to reestablish communications. And so there's a lot to it. I understand that you feel frustrated during these large, that you can't get a voicemail out.
Even in this building, we didn't know what was going
Yeah.
on. We had to come down to see the people who work here.
Okay, well, I'm gonna pass that one to your facility staff, and we'll talk more if there's any support that we can provide in there. And they can talk to you about your facility-specific communications. But you raised a terrific question, which makes a point that I didn't make. And that is during disasters, it's much, much better to use text messaging than trying to make a voice call.
If you can make text messages.
And generally, they're much more successful. But I don't want to give you a percentage, but it's a much higher percentage than voice calls. Okay. Other questions? Yes, sir.
What's your position on installing seismic valves and gas lines?
Yeah.
Should we have an earthquake, if it shears the gas line, it will start a fire, but the seismic valve will shut it off?
Right. Well, once, yes. The question was, what's my opinion on the installation of seismic valves in home gas lines? And they are a safety feature. And so in the event of an earthquake that disrupts the gas system and creates a leak, the valve will close to prevent the exit of the gas. Okay. It's probably a good safety device. However, the problem with it is that once that gas has been turned off, it requires San Diego Gas and Electric to come out to turn it back on. Now, you're going to want to come out and do a system assessment anyway. But if this has been a wide-scale incident, and there's a number of facilities or a wide area impacted, it could take San Diego Gas and Electric many weeks or days to restore that trip. Even if that trip occurred without an actual leak, you could be out of power. So I understand where they developed, I can understand the decision on it, but I don't have a recommendation on the installation of this valve. Any other questions? I certainly appreciate your attention today.